Representative Rob Martwick coming to you again on May 17th, 2018. If you saw that first little clip that we had posted about, I think it was about 20 seconds with a little technical difficulty, this is the one hopefully that you'll want to watch. Hopefully we'll stay connected this time. So coming to you at the end of session, we're closing in on our budget deadline. Everything is sort of amplifying, lots of bills running, lots of news. And of course I want to come to you and try and give you an update on what's been going on in Springfield. So number one, guns. Guns has been a big topic this issue, or this session, of course, been one of the real hot button issues. And as many of you will remember, we passed a series of bills designed to bring about what a lot of people, certainly in the legislature, believed would be common sense gun measures. These bills were passed and then sent to the governor's desk. And one of those was a 72-hour waiting period for purchasing an assault weapon, right? So in current Illinois law, if you buy a handgun, you have to wait 72 hours between the time you purchase it and the time you take possession. But an assault rifle, you only had to wait 24 hours. So this seemed like a pretty common sense reform, right? Let's put assault weapons on the same time frame as handguns. So this bill was passed and sent to the governor. Another bill that outlawed the use of the bump stocks. This is the attachment to a gun that makes a semi-automatic rifle fire automatically, and this is what the Las Vegas shooter used when he committed that horrible crime out there. So both of these bills were passed to the governor. The governor took the bill that required the 72-hour waiting period on assault weapons, and he issued what's called an amendatory veto. And so what he did was he said, okay, we'll move the waiting period up to 72 hours, and we will add the bump stock ban to this bill. I'm going to amend the bill to add the bump stock bill into one bill. And then he added a strange provision which caught a lot of people by surprise, and I think most people thought was really a political and even somewhat stupid move. He added the death penalty back. Okay, so as many of you know, Illinois had a real problem with the death penalty. There was lots of concern that we had, maybe over the course of years, sent a lot of people to their death that maybe were not even guilty. There was a string of people through the Illinois Innocence Project who were sitting on death row who wound up being found to have not committed the crime that they were waiting to die for. And so George Ryan outlawed the death penalty. It was followed up by legislative action, and the death penalty has been outlawed for quite some time. Governor Rauner decided that he would bring in the death penalty again in this debate. It clearly is a bad move. It's not the way you should go about it. If we're to have a question about the death penalty, or whether or not it, if we're going to have a debate on whether or not it should be reinstituted, it certainly shouldn't cloud up a good piece of legislation on guns, right? The more specific, the more you're able to address the problem. When you start adding in other things, it really doesn't make sense. So we're waiting to see what happens with that. Now that he's vetoed it, it'll come back to the legislature and we'll deal with it. Number two, Equal Rights Amendment. Yes, believe it or not, the Equal Rights Amendment, which was proposed 40 years ago, has still never passed in, of all states, blue Illinois. The Equal Rights Amendment, which says that all women shall be treated equally as men, has still not passed in Illinois. So there's been a big push to pass it here in Illinois. And as of yet, it hasn't been called for a vote. And one of the reasons that it hasn't been called for a vote is, by and large, an awful lot of Republicans still oppose this concept. Governor Rauner will not come out and officially support the Equal Rights Amendment. He will not push the Republican members of the legislature to come out and vote for this. And as of yet, there is not enough votes to reach the 71 vote threshold. Remember, there are 67 Democrats, 51 Republicans. Unless there are a handful of Republicans to join us on this common sense measure, it will once again fail in Illinois. Number three, CPS special education. This has been a lot of news about CPS special education. There was a big investigation that was started by WBEZ about the practices under former CEO Forrest Claypool, and it found that the Chicago Public Schools acted illegally, really. They enacted policies that were driven by their desire to save money, and these special education policies really punished kids who were really in need of special education. The Illinois State Board of Education did their own investigation and really came out with a horribly scathing report. It's another real black mark on the operation of the Chicago Public Schools. And so the Illinois State Board of Education is now going to, in a sense, take control. They are going to work with CPS, and CPS will not be able to make any changes to any sort of special education policies without having strong input and the permission of the Illinois State Board of Education. So we basically have to hold their hands on special education policy. Really inefficient, the wrong way to run government, but of course that kind of leads back to one of the things I've been pushing for the last 3 years. Perhaps if we had a Board of Education that was accountable to the taxpayers and the citizens of the city of Chicago, like through the course of regular elections, right? So if we had an elected school board, maybe we wouldn't have this problem. So, we'll continue that push. Please join me on it. We're going to get that elected school board one way or another. So that's CPS special education. Number 4, many of you heard just yesterday there was a shooting in Dixon. What happened was there was a student at a school during graduation practice came out, displayed a gun, apparently started shooting, and a school resource officer, a police officer who works in the school, ran after the victim, exchanged gunfire with him, shot him in the shoulder. No one died. The shooter is in custody, and today there was a celebration of the heroic efforts of the officer, and he should be lauded for his great work. It is great that we have police officers that are willing to have the courage to confront school shooters. But there's been another side to this story, and again, this is government function. While we're lauding the efforts of these police officers, we're starting to hear news stories about this young man who was the shooter, and it turns out that he was a troubled young man who was apparently bullied by his classmates. He had spent the last 3 months not in school, doing his work from home because he couldn't even go to school because he was being bullied so bad. But he was allowed to graduate, and so this whole situation happened. And so a lot of people are starting to ask the question about, well, for years we've been decimating the mental health services that we provide to troubled students by eliminating positions of school counselors and eliminating positions of school social workers in order to save money. And so, while we're so grateful for this officer in this moment, because we need them in those moments, we're saying to ourselves, are we failing as a government by making these cuts to these important positions? Shouldn't we be trying to solve the problems for these children before they turn to that sort of action? So that's number 4, the Dixon shooting. Number 5, this is an interesting one, CMS audit. So this is a great one. Governor Rauner's CMS, Central Management Services, they handle a lot of the work. They recently they were recently audited by the Auditor General, and the audit was regarding a lease that they took under a warehouse in Springfield. So this is just beautiful. They completely disregarded the procurement code, which Governor Rauner brags as one of his very few accomplishments, was revamping the way that we go through our procurement process, right? He wants to make it more efficient. There were strict rules put in because prior governors had taken advantage of it and basically committed corruption and insider dealing. What did the audit show? Well, we leased a warehouse in Springfield to store records in a way that was completely rife with corruption, reeks of insider dealing, right? Somebody getting a special deal, and we wound up leasing a building when we could have purchased it for 1/3 of what we're going to spend on the lease. Bad story, and again, this sort of thing shows, you got a guy like Governor Rauner comes in and he says, I'm the outsider businessman, I'm going to clean up all this corrupt business. And then we have the Quincy Veterans Home disaster, where 13 veterans die because they're poisoned by bacteria. And the whole thing is a big attempted cover-up Now we find out that he leased a building and changed the rules in the middle of the procurement process to favor one of the bidders, and we wind up spending 3 times as much to lease a building as we could have paid to buy it. Not a good sign. More troubles for the governor. Finally, number 6, pensions in the Federal Reserve. And as many of you know, I chair the pension committee, and so it's of great interest to me because really all of our financial picture stems around how we handle our pensions and the debt that's associated with it. So recently, the Civic Federation, which is a very pro-business, they really preach, they lots of corporate members, they preach fiscal responsibility, they preach getting a hold of our finances, our debt. They would like low taxes, but they're realistic about it. You can't just dream it or wish for it to happen. You have to have a plan. So they held a summit on Illinois pensions and they brought in all these experts to talk about our pension crisis, the debt that we owe our pensions, and one of the panels of presenters were 3 economists from the Federal Reserve. Now, let me repeat that. 3 economists from the Federal Reserve, okay? Not 3 Democratic legislators or 3 Republican legislators, 3 economists from the Federal Reserve, okay? You know what those guys typically deal with? Math and money. 2 of the things I like to preach about, right? Math and money. Problems with money should be solved with math and money. And so they came in, and I quote, "A tax increase to address Illinois' pension problem is inevitable. A tax increase is inevitable." In other words, mathematically, it cannot be solved without additional revenue. So what did they propose? They proposed the imposition of a statewide property tax. A statewide property tax of 1% using the money to go directly into the pension debt, to pay down the pension debt, so we can solve that problem and get ourselves back onto a path of fiscal responsibility. Now, is that a good idea? I will tell you at first blush, I don't think it is. Illinois has very high property taxes. 1% property tax doesn't sound like much until you realize that the average property tax in Illinois is about 1.5% of fair market value. So you add another 1% to that, that's actually a pretty substantial increase in property taxes. I would have done it a different way, but that's irrelevant. The point that you should be taking here is that 3, and I repeat, Federal Reserve economists said that the only mathematical solution to our problem is to find a way to get additional revenue. And in fact, they said, as people questioned them and grilled them over the idea of a statewide property tax, they said, well, you're going to have to raise taxes. So are you going to do it through sales taxes? Are you going to do it through income taxes? Or are you going to do it through property taxes? Now, many of you know I support a progressive income tax because if you know you have to raise the money, the only question is, where do you raise it, how do you raise it, and from whom do you raise it? I would like to see a fair tax put in place where we're asking the people who make more money to pay more money to solve our pension problem. Once we do that, we can put the state on a path to prosperity and lower taxes for the next generation. That's a mathematical solution to our problems. My big gripe these days is that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are just absolutely refusing, once again, to even discuss revenue or to talk about revenue solutions, options like a progressive income tax. They emphatically come out and said, absolutely, we won't talk about it. Which to me, if you have, and I repeat, 3 Federal Reserve economists saying you have to do it, when you say I won't do it, then all you're saying is, I'm not going to solve the problem, and I'm going to make it worse tomorrow and worse for the next generation. That's the wrong way to handle this problem. It's time for us to do what's responsible, to step up, to solve our finances once and for all, and put Illinois back on a path to prosperity. Math and money is how you get it done. So that's it for now. Those are my 6 things. Guns and the death penalty, ERA, which can't pass because of Governor Rauner won't support it. CPS special education is failing and the state's taking it over. We need more counselors and mental health professionals in schools, but thank God for a police officer who was able to come in and save some lives. Unfortunately, there's some insider dealing going on, and one of the things the governor brags about, it apparently is a failure. And finally, pensions and Federal Reserve, we've got some problems, but we've got to face them in a mathematical way and find the solutions to them, and I'm committed to that. So that's it for now. More to come next week. We've got 2 more weeks left of session, so keep an eye out for future updates. I'll be bringing them to you. And as always, thank you for watching. If you have any comments, criticisms, or complaints, please respond or put something here in the comments. You can always reach me at my office at 773-286-1115, or you can email me at repmartwick@gmail.com. We'll be busy the next 2 weeks. A lot of hours in the chamber, so if I don't get back to you immediately, stick with me. I'll get back to you eventually. Thank you, everyone, for watching. See you next week.